No one wakes up thinking, today is the day I die. But from the moment you were born, your time started running out. Every birthday you celebrate is really an unconscious celebration of survival. Every laugh, every small victory, every meaningless argument, every plan for the future, all of it happens under a roof you pretend not to see, the roof of your own ending. We live surrounded by this illusion. People die around us all the time. Neighbors, friends, strangers, people who had lunch yesterday and are gone today. And still, tomorrow morning you'll go back to work, complain about traffic, stress over bills, post a selfie, plan your next vacation. You'll act as if death doesn't apply to you, as if somehow you're different. That's the lie, the most effective and maybe the most necessary lie humanity ever told itself. In his book, The Denial of Death, Ernest Becker didn't sugarcoat the truth. He said that humans are the only creatures aware that they're going to die. And that knowledge terrifies us so deeply that we had to invent a symbolic world just to bear the weight of being alive. We had to believe we have a greater purpose, a special story, a mission. We had to distract ourselves with work, relationships, success, possessions, and pride. We had to create religions, nations, and cultures, anything that made it seem like death wasn't the final stop. Have you ever noticed how no one talks about this out loud? How uncomfortable it feels to admit that time is passing, that everything you are, everything you love, will someday cease to exist? How unsettling it is to remember that every person you know, including you, is standing in an invisible line waiting for their turn to die? The denial of death is what keeps us sane. Becker went further. He argued that almost every human behavior, from the thirst for power to the smallest daily habits, is born from the desperate attempt to become immortal, even if only in memory. We build legacies, make art, raise children, take selfies, carve our names into tombstones, all in the hope of being remembered. The terror of death doesn't paralyze us, it drives us. And that's why the world never stops spinning, not out of love for life, but out of fear of its end. Everyday life is a massive distraction. Billions of people wake up, put on clothes, eat breakfast, rush out the door, work, plan, earn, worry, love, and hate, all while pretending death is just a distant statistic, something that happens to other people. That's the first great irony of existence. We all know the ending, yet we act like it's impossible. It's not optimism or innocence, it's a brutal, sophisticated psychological defense. Becker called it vital denial, a silent pact between your brain and your consciousness. To function, you must forget, you must repress, you must block out the truth of your mortality. He wrote, "The idea of death, the fear of it, haunts the human being like nothing else. It is the source of anxiety that shadows us from birth until death." But this anxiety isn't always visible. It hides inside ordinary behaviors. When someone delays a doctor's appointment for months despite obvious symptoms, it's not just laziness, it's denial. When someone takes on massive debt to buy a car that defines them, it's not just vanity, it's a hidden attempt to feel important, to build an identity strong enough to push away the thought of being insignificant and mortal. Every object we buy, every goal we chase, every lifestyle we perform, it's all a way to escape the thought of the end. It's not about luxury or taste, it's about protection, a symbolic antidote against the idea that we're only flesh in time. Becker was clear. Man cannot rid himself of the terror of death. He can only repress it, and that repression is the price he pays for sanity. This repression hides inside everything. Small talk in elevators, fake laughter at family lunches, childish couple fights, obsessive worry about social status. Every time you get caught up in problems that seem huge but are meaningless in the face of death, you're unknowingly exercising that denial. This is the hidden engine of social life, organized distraction, to live inside the illusion that you're something more than a mortal animal. To live believing that each day isn't just another day lost, but a step towards something meaningful, something that no one can quite define. Here lies the cruelest point of Becker's reasoning. Human beings invented the concept of a meaningful life because the raw truth would be unbearable. Look around. No one lives like someone who knows they'll die. People live as if they're immune, as if they have infinite time, as if they've been deceived, and worse, as if they willingly accept the lie. That's the power of denial. It's not a mistake, it's a necessity. Without it, civilization wouldn't last a week. Without it, no one would get out of bed. At the root of every human behavior lies this silent pact with forgetting, because truly accepting that everything could end in the next second is something the mind simply can't handle. That's why we keep buying, arguing, dreaming, and suffering as if time weren't mercilessly swallowing us whole. There's something strange about human behavior, something that doesn't fit with the logic of our mortality. We know we're temporary, yet we live as if we're eternal. We build, hoard, compete, kill, and die for paper, for titles, for objects that won't follow us into the grave. If you were truly aware of your death each day, you wouldn't suffer over lost money. You wouldn't burn with envy. You wouldn't hate those who have more. You wouldn't waste your youth locked in offices chasing status. The truth is, death has been muted in your mind, silenced on purpose. Becker saw this with surgical precision. He said that humans created a psychological antidote to their unbearable fear of death, the project of immortality. He wrote, "Man needs to feel that his life matters somehow, that he is a hero, that his acts and thoughts count for something lasting. That's why humanity is obsessed with leaving a legacy." People work themselves to exhaustion, not for money, but for what money represents, a symbolic signature on the world. Fame, fortune, children, followers, books, companies, it's all the same impulse to carve our names into eternity, to pretend we won't be forgotten. The question every human should be haunted by is the one we avoid the most. What do we take with us when we die? The answer is obvious, uncomfortable, and always the same. Nothing. Not the house, not the car, not the clothes, not even our memories. We don't even take our own names. Everything fades, everything returns to nothing. And yet here we are, killing, betraying, destroying, accumulating, as if life was a game with a final prize, as if there were a scoreboard, as if the last breath were a victory. That's the illusion, and the world is built upon it. The ancient Stoics understood this long before modern psychology did. Memento mori, remember that you will die, was never meant as a threat, but as a reminder. A reminder that life is too short to waste on inner wars, shallow desires, and empty vanity. Becker said that every culture ever created is, at its core, a symbolic construction against the terror of death. Religion promises eternity, politics promises legacy, work promises purpose, love promises remembrance. All of it is the same attempt to deny the same thing, the end. And maybe the greatest act of courage is not conquering the world, but accepting that in the end, the world will never be enough. What do we take with us? Nothing, except the way we treated those beside us. Nothing except the love we gave and perhaps the love we were able to receive. Everything else is illusion. The rest is dust. And if there's something that can truly save a human being from existential despair, it isn't money, power, or status. It's exactly what the Stoics pointed out and what Becker concluded. Only love can save us, not because it lasts forever, but because it makes the now worth living, even knowing that the end is inevitable. Death is certain. What we do with this brief interval between birth and death, that's what matters. There's a truth that no one likes to face, but that quietly governs every civilization since the dawn of time. Paradise was invented to make life bearable. The idea of something after isn't just spiritual comfort, it's psychological armor. Becker argued that religion didn't arise because humans are naturally spiritual, but because they are inevitably mortal. The fear of death is the soil where all religions grow. Heaven, hell, reincarnation, eternal souls, guardian spirits, these are stories crafted to ease a silent question. What happens when I stop existing? Becker wrote, "Religion is the most elaborate and sophisticated cultural scheme ever created to deny the reality of death." And it's hard to disagree. Every spiritual promise has the same function, to sedate the terror, to whisper, "You won't end here," that somehow you will continue, maybe in a new body, an invisible world, a paradise of rewards, or even a hell of punishments. Death becomes a transition, not a termination. That's the best-kept secret of the human mind. Without that belief, people would collapse. Fear would paralyze life. That's why the idea of eternity lives at the core of every religion. Eternity isn't just a poetic concept, it's an antidote. It's what prevents the terror of death from tearing apart the social order. And you can see it shaping our everyday lives, the way we handle pain, loss, and injustice. When someone dies young, people say, "God knows what he's doing." When tragedy strikes, we say, "It was meant to be." When the world feels cruel, the promise of a better one after death becomes the escape hatch. Becker wasn't naive when he exposed this structure. He understood that the lie was necessary. As brutal as it is to admit, without it, humanity might not survive. This isn't just about faith, it's about mental survival. And here lies a truth that almost no one wants to confront. Most people don't believe in God because they understand Him. They believe because they're terrified of dying, because they need to believe there's something beyond the void. But belief itself isn't the problem. The problem is living a life of arrogance, greed, and cruelty while comforting yourself with the thought, in the end, God will forgive me. That's the farce that allows evil to thrive, the unconscious certainty that somehow everything will be fixed after death. Becker captured this perfectly. He said that belief in an afterlife isn't mere hope, it's a psychological necessity for coping with mortality. That's why religion didn't sell comfort, they offered clarity. Memento mori wasn't meant to paralyze you, it was meant to awaken you, to remind you that time is limited, that the only chance to do what matters is now. Not later, not in another life. Death is the center of everything, the invisible presence behind every choice you make. But religion and most human belief systems exist precisely to keep that presence at a safe distance. It's a necessary illusion, a theater that prevents insanity. Since the dawn of caves to the rise of cathedrals, humanity has been telling itself beautiful stories to avoid panic. Yet deep down, everyone knows there is no escape. The ending is always the same. The only difference is what you do with the time you have left. Have you noticed how in times of crisis, people become crueler? When the world starts collapsing, wars, pandemics, disasters, something dark rises from the depths of human nature. The instinct of denial turns into rage. It's not coincidence. It's fear in disguise. Because beneath every war, every fanatic movement, every random act of violence, there's a silent horror of mortality. Becker made this brutally clear. The fear of death is the hidden engine behind hatred, discrimination, and violence. When people can't symbolically deny their mortality, they start denying it in others, by destroying them. That's the darkest part of Becker's thesis. Death doesn't just haunt us, it makes us dangerous. The feeling of vulnerability is unbearable. When the mind is forced to face its own fragility, it tries to compensate. And the most primitive way to compensate is to reduce others to something disposable. That's why societies in crisis, economic, political, or social, always slide into tribalism. Strangers become enemies, minorities become threats. Those who think differently become mortal opponents. It's not just about ideology, it's about identity. It's about fear. When humans feel life slipping away, they cling to groups, flags, gods, and guns. They need to feel part of something bigger, something eternal. They need to believe that their culture, their nation, their faith is superior, immortal. Becker wrote, "Man builds his identity as armor against death, and every attack on his belief system is felt as an attack on his survival." That's the hidden truth behind so many of history's horrors. Genocides, crusades, political persecutions, they're not just struggles for power. They're acts of denial. The other represents everything that threatens our illusion of immortality. So, unconsciously, eliminating the other feels like self-defense. The human mind cannot bear the thought of its own extinction. So it clings to symbols, the flag, the god, the race, the team, the family name, the nation. These symbols are, at their core, fantasies of eternity. When someone destroys your symbol, it's not just an insult. It's like they've destroyed your only shield against death. Human history isn't a timeline of noble causes. It's a sequence of desperate attempts to pretend the end doesn't exist. And when those attempts fail, violence takes their place. That might be the most perverse side of our relationship with death. It doesn't just make us sensitive or philosophical, it often turns us into monsters. The stronger the fear, the more brutal the reaction. Death is the great invisible ruler of humanity, and the further we push it away, the blinder we become to our own cruelty. What Becker exposed wasn't just a theory of fear, it was a mirror showing that everything we call progress, culture, civilization, is built on a foundation of anxiety and denial. The modern world, for all its sophistication, is still a massive psychological fortress against death. Look around. Endless consumerism, digital identity, self-branding, obsession with youth, social media validation. These are not signs of enlightenment. They're symptoms of terror. The more people lose touch with meaning, the more they cling to images of life. We've built a global culture that worships appearance because appearance hides decay. You scroll through your phone, surrounded by faces smiling, traveling, posing, succeeding, as if mortality were just a rumor. The world has turned denial into entertainment. The philosopher Kierkegaard called this the sickness unto death, a kind of despair that comes not from dying, but from refusing to face that we will. Becker's brilliance was in connecting all these threads. He showed that even atheists, even those who claim to reject religion, still live inside symbolic systems of immortality. They may not pray, but they build legacies. They may not believe in heaven, but they dream of being remembered. Fame becomes a substitute for paradise. Followers replace worshipers. Virality becomes resurrection. The digital age didn't destroy religion, it reinvented it. We just swapped altars for algorithms. Our new gods are numbers, metrics, reach, relevance. And what's ironic is that these digital immortality projects are even more fragile than the old myths. One algorithmic shift and your existence disappears. One update and your entire symbolic self vanishes. But we keep uploading, posting, performing, because to disappear online feels like dying twice. The denial of death has evolved, not vanished, and the more we run from it, the more meaningless life becomes. You can see it in the anxiety epidemic, the loneliness, the frantic pursuit of stimulation. Every dopamine hit is a micro-escape from existential dread. Becker's diagnosis was brutal. Humanity can't handle reality without illusion. We are, by nature, delusional. The only question is which delusion you choose. Some choose religion, others choose money. Some choose romance, politics, fame, or nihilism. But no one escapes the need for meaning, because without it, death becomes unbearable. That's why cynicism is never the final stage. Even the most nihilistic person secretly believes in something, they just don't admit it. The idea of nothing matters is itself a desperate defense, because if nothing matters, then death loses its sting. But deep down, everyone wants something to matter. Becker said to live fully is to live with an awareness of the terror of death, but without being completely overwhelmed by it. That's the balance. Awareness without paralysis, acceptance without despair. The irony is that truly facing death can make you freer than denial ever will. When you stop pretending you have infinite time, priorities rearrange themselves. Petty grudges fade. Possessions lose meaning. What remains are the things you can't buy: honesty, compassion, and peace. The problem is that most people don't want peace. They want distraction. Peace requires silence, and silence is where death speaks the loudest. So we fill the void with noise: scrolls, ads, conversations, plans, anything to drown out the whisper, reminding us that this too shall end. Becker's ideas were rejected by many because they were too raw. He tore through the comforting lies of progress and left humanity face to face with its deepest truth, that we are terrified animals pretending to be gods. And yet hidden in his work is a strange kind of hope. If denial built civilization, then maybe awareness can redeem it. Maybe meaning isn't found in escaping death, but in integrating it. Imagine if people truly lived with death in mind, not as a shadow, but as a compass. Every decision, every relationship, every act of kindness would carry a different weight. You wouldn't waste your life chasing validation from people who are also dying. You wouldn't destroy others just to feel significant. You'd live with humility, gratitude, and perhaps even grace. Death isn't the enemy, it's the teacher. It's the silent instructor behind every lesson of love, loss, patience, and forgiveness. It humbles you, reminds you that everything you cling to is borrowed. Becker never said to reject illusion completely. He knew that total awareness could crush the human mind. His point was to choose illusions consciously, to build symbolic systems that affirm life, not deny it, to live meaningfully not because it will last forever, but because it won't. The task, he said, is not to escape fear, but to transcend it, to stop being ruled by it, because fear is what drives the madness of the world, the greed, the hatred, the arrogance. The moment you stop fearing death, no one can control you. Not governments, not corporations, not ideologies. You become untouchable, not immortal, but unenslaved. Maybe that's what real freedom looks like. Not the absence of death, but the acceptance of it. Becker died young at 49 of cancer. But even in his last writings, he remained consistent. Death, he said, was not a tragedy, but a fact. The tragedy is wasting life pretending it won't happen. So what's left for us, the living? Perhaps not answers, but a posture. To live as if every moment were borrowed. To speak truthfully. To love without guarantee. To create without the illusion of permanence. To understand that meaning isn't something found, it's something made, moment by moment, under the shadow of the inevitable. Becker's insight still cuts like a blade through the modern noise. The irony of man's condition is that he must live in hope of being heroic, yet his death renders that hope impossible. And yet that's what makes it beautiful. The futility doesn't destroy meaning, it creates it. Because meaning exists only in contrast to the void. Without death, there would be no urgency, no love, no art, no need for connection. Life would be a static repetition of pleasure, an endless loop without depth. Death gives shape to everything. It's not a curse, it's the frame around the painting. We keep running from it, but maybe the real awakening begins when we stop. When you stop treating death as an intruder and start seeing it as your oldest companion. It's been beside you since birth, silently counting down, reminding you even when you forget that you are alive, you breathe, you think, you feel. And that, in itself, is miraculous. Becker showed us that denial keeps the world running, but awareness makes the soul real. The world would always need illusion, but individuals can choose consciousness, not to escape fear, but to walk with it. To look death in the eye and say, I know you're there, but I'm still here, for now. And maybe that's all the meaning we ever needed.